from there. All right. I met Andrew a couple years ago through a mutual acquaintance. I think it was Mark Martin or somebody was asking about if I had any hens or any wood ducks. So like, oh yeah, I always got wood ducks around. So it was this graduate student was looking to ban some hen wood ducks on nest to do this study. He was putting geolocators on them. I thought, oh, this is great. And so Andrew and I met up. We tag team for a couple of days, going not only around Horicon Marsh, but my own farm. I had a blast. I know that. I mean, and it was wonderful to be a part of this, science project. So Andrew went and got himself a real job just recently. So he is now out in California, working with the Department of Fish and Game, is it out there? Fish and Wildlife out there. So Andrew's going to tell you a little bit about his study, what he did, his results, and that was his master thesis. And he was successful in obtaining that degree and led to this new and wonderful job out in California. So Andy, take it away.
All right, I will. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see this?
Yes, wood duck ecology.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me. I'm excited to talk about wood ducks. They're one of my favorite waterfowl species, and we really just wanted to know a bit more about kind of their migratory patterns, the chronology, so the timing of migration, what may drive migration, and some other aspects of breeding ecology that we could tease out while using the same kind of equipment we use to try to track these birds. So that's kind of the title is kind of simple: wood duck ecology and an inside look at annual wood duck movement ecology and breeding ecology. Yeah, again, I'm a former graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and now I work for the Department of Fish and Wildlife within California. So with no further ado, let's get some introduction. So why do animals migrate? So bird migration is a regular seasonal movement, often north and south along a flyway between breeding and wintering grounds. And many species of bird migrate. Migration carries high costs in predation and mortality, including from hunting by humans, and is driven primarily by availability of food. So with that, why do animals migrate? Well, they migrate because they need to exploit food resources. They need to breed and protect young. They need to escape predation, or they need to escape cold and inclement weather. So how are we able to quantify these movements? So recent technological advances allow us to start tracking birds real time. As you see here, we see a snow goose with a GPS solar panel GPS back neck collar. So we can use that to track real-time movements. And so they're doing this right now in California, as you can see here, USGS. And we can also start trying to use VHF bibs that have been highly successful in wood duck migratory and breeding ecology in Illinois with the Forbes Ecological Center. Or we can start to use geolocators or use what we call light level, and where we can start to measure light throughout time and space. And we can use that to develop latitudinal and longitudinal coordination throughout the planet. So what can we learn about these movements? So we can learn chronology of migration. So to understand how birds interact with their environment, we have to consider that full annual cycle. The full annual cycle describes a bird's ecology across the year. A migratory bird's annual cycle can be divided into 4 phases, as you can see here in this graph. And these 4 phases are breeding, which happen between May and July. Fall migration, which usually happens around August through November. Then we get into the wintering months, and where they overwinter in southern United States. And finally, to get back up to their breeding locations, they need to migrate north, and that usually happens between March and April, and that's when you start to see them back in Wisconsin. We can also learn about how migration is connected and how migratory connectivity is influential in many migratory bird ecology. So migratory connectivity describes the spatial and temporal linkages of individuals and populations between seasons that result from migratory movements. So in invertebrates, this usually entails regular seasonal migration from a breeding site to a non-breeding site and back by the same generation of individuals. So as you can see here with this highlighter I will get out, you can see that we can see high spatial connectivity where individuals from multiple breeding populations visit different stopover locations. So say breeding populations in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, they stay streamlined, and birds that breed in Minnesota stay kind of separated from birds that breed in Wisconsin or Michigan, as you can see here. And then we can see low spatial connectivity where individuals from multiple breeding populations share the same stopover. And so this is kind of what wood ducks do. And then high temporal connectivity or high time or connectivity, where individuals from multiple breeding populations arrive at stopover locations at different times. And then low temporal connectivity, which individuals from multiple breeding populations arrive at stopover locations at similar times. We can also learn what triggers migration. So we're looking, much like humans who move for a job or to be near to a better school for our kids, birds might migrate from places with less resources to those that offer more to them and their family. So when birds migrate, they are typically looking for 2 things: food and places to nest and raise their young. Many birds go south for the winter to trade freezing winter weather for warmer tropical climates. And these warmer climates also often have a more abundant supply of food and more places to shelter and nest than the cold regions they left. So each year at the same time, glands in migratory birds species have special chemicals called hormones, and they get released into the system. And these natural signs, including the gradually changing day length, cause this to happen automatically. These hormones make birds behave differently, and they start flying around restlessly and begin to gather into flocks. In spring, hormones also start preparing a bird for breeding. Its sexual organs, which have been hidden away during the winter, enlarge in preparation for mating. So as you can see, again, kind of from this graph, we see this kind of annual cycle from breeding to autumn migration to wintering to spring migration. As you can see, a lot of this migration, these edges of migration we're seeing are usually triggered by local cues like weather and food availability, or social cues like flocking up and getting together for fall flights, and also even competition where if you're moving to a newer location with less individuals, then competition is reduced. And finally, we can look at basic migratory and breeding behavior. So you can see on this map, this is a bird that was banded in September 25th, 2021, and you can see fall migration represents the red, and spring migration represents the blue. So it took kind of a indirect path to southern Louisiana, and then kind of flew back up left right around February 24th and kind of flew directly up. So just by looking at this, you can see that a fall migration is kind of a more elongated, where spring migration might happen in a quicker time variable. So let's get into wood duck migration. So what I used were geolocators, which are 1 gram archival data loggers that record ambient light. And so we can use the ambient light to identify sunrises and sunsets through time and space. So then we can all estimate these latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates to get rough locations where these tags have been. So we used most of Wisconsin as a study area. As you can see here with the blue dots, the bigger dots representing the proportion of geolocators put out within these wildlife areas and private lands. And as you can see, we tried to aim to put out 150 each year for 2020 and 2021, but we ended up getting more geolocators from the Wisconsin DNR. And so we put out another 120 in 2022. So with that, we put out roughly 420 geolocators within this 3-year span. And we expected, we figured that recovery rates for wood ducks harvested were rather high, anywhere between 10 to 12%. So we expected to get about 10 to 15 geolocators back a year. And so in 2020, when we were embraced with COVID, it really dampened the availability to travel to get wood ducks caught and banded. So we stuck to kind of the Mead wildlife area, which is kind of located in north central Wisconsin, and where you see this bigger dot right here. So the first year we put out 148 on the Mead wildlife area. We put 32 out on males because we were worried that we weren't going to get our whole full sample size out. And then the rest went out on breeding females. So it's a good array. We have a good spatial heterogeneity, and so it's really cool to be able to get a big sample size like that. So we used a bunch of a variety of capture techniques. We use baited traps. So these are called decoy traps. And so we used a decoy that we bought from Avian X, and we threw that in there in that cage. And each of there's 3 chambers, and breeding females during the spring get highly territorial, and so they want to come check out whatever's within their breeding pond. And so usually you get larger females attracted to these decoy traps because they're kind of bullies. We used baited swimming traps, so it's a fence, as you can see here, that you kind of line up like a kind of oval shape, and then you bring the 2 ends in together and make a funnel, and you bait that inside, and these birds will like to swim in circles, and so they'll swim in circles and get into that funnel and work their way in, and that's how you can catch birds that way as well. And then one of my favorite is these bow net platform traps we designed, where we put corn on these floating platforms with a remote triggered bow net, and we could catch birds this way too. And finally, one of the more technical ways to catch birds or waterfowl, water birds in general, is using rocket netting techniques to catch a wide range of different species of waterfowl. when we got birds in hand, we banded the birds. We took a bunch of morphometric measurements. We took Coleman measurements. We took whole head measurements, parcel measurements, wing chord measurements, and mass to look at kind of body condition, the general body condition of these birds getting here during their spring migration. And so we put geolocators out on these birds as well. So we use these polyvinyl plastic blue bands that we had to roll ourselves, and then we attach what you see the geolocator with a UV resistant zip tie. And so just the zip tie is holding that geolocator in, and luckily we haven't had any loss as of right now. So this is kind of just the analytical methods we used. It's not very interesting. It's kind of an in-depth view of the analytics we use to kind of develop what you see these animated maps, and which give you kind of this real-time movement and to see what they're doing. So so we use geolocators, modeling. We use a couple of different R packages. BSTAG, Geolite, and FlightR. What they do is pre-process the data, get rid of all outliers. They obtain twilights, so we can then extrapolate latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates. And then the Geolite package defines all locations, so it gives us kind of 50 these credible intervals around each location. And then we can use FlightR to calibrate the error and on a particle filter to kind of develop what we're seeing here as these animated maps. So getting into what the raw light level data is when we download these geolocators. So again, we need the geolocators back to get the data off, and so what we're looking at here is kind of on the x-axis is time in months, and then you have what we consider lux, which is kind of a light measurement. And so how to read this is we center midnight right in the middle of the graph. So you see this, and you see the red line is midnight, and then the gray areas are what is the measured light. So right here it's sunrise, right here is sunset. And just with our raw eye, we can start to see birds in this yellow bracket is right here. We can start to see birds prospecting. So it's measured light, right? So each one of these slivers is 1 day. And so what we can do is you can see that there's a portion right here where it's black. So it may have went into a natural cavity or a nest box to check it out. You can see more happens more here. And so maybe finally it finds a natural cavity or nest box, and then starts maybe laying eggs for 1 to 12 or 1 to 14 consecutive days. And then you can see all this darkened area is the bird incubating, and this light level right here are daily nest breaks. So when they leave to go get a flight in, or go get some resources. So it's really cool that you can just see what's going on just in this raw light level data. But like back to migration. So this analysis included 13 birds that produced an annual migration. And what we saw here is just the duration spent in each cycle, which is the number of days. And so you can see that it's spent about 45 to 50 days in spring migration. It spent about 125 to 150 days in overwintering in the southern portions of their wintering range. And then you can see auto migration kind of both of these are overlapping. So about constant 45 to 50 days of auto migration. You can see in 2020 that these birds traveled about a mean average about 1,500 kilometers. In 2021, you can see just a little bit more, about 100 kilometers more. They flew about a rate of about 100 or 140 kilometers a day. In auto migration, so it seems like it might be a little slower. And then in spring migration, you see the rates about 161 kilometers a day. And then this is kind of a easier map, and you can see the proportion of how much time they spent annually in each of these cycles. So spring and auto migration, they spend about 23% of their time, and then breeding and non-breeding, they spend about 70 or 80% of their time in those respective breeding and non-breeding ranges. Yeah, so right here, sorry, getting a little ahead of myself. So now we can look at individual geolocator maps. Here again, we developed animated maps for each individual within this analysis, and you can see the time bars above here, so you can see it's a little fast, but it's really cool what we can do with this. And these are all different. But what I do want to show you is that you can see these little movements before we see this big southern jump, right? For almost each individual bird. This is a different bird now on this side, and then this is another different bird. So what I'm thinking here is they're experiencing it's a German word called Zugenruhe, which means they get this restlessness before they make these big southern movements. So these birds are kind of getting up and stretching and exercising their wings to get ready for that big push during the fall migration. And so let's switch gears now and kind of get back into talking about wood duck breeding. So again, you've seen this this graph. I kind of explained it to you, but now let's kind of dive in and see what these signatures look like for each individual day. So this represents an individual day from here to here. And you can see this is kind of background. So if a geolocator was left in an open area, it would record light as you would get closer to noon, and then you would start losing light, and that's kind of what you see here. So this is kind of background. But we can start to develop like indicators to individual activities. So like this, we consider this prospecting. So we see that the birds out and about within a wetland, like forested wetland habitats. You see you lose light, and so it dips, and so I'm guessing this is when they're in a natural cavity or a nest box. You can see it, they do it 2 or 3 times a day. So it's really interesting to see that like individuals may be going into different nest boxes and natural cavities highly frequently right before they choose where to breed or where to nest. And then again, you can see that the individual takes a nest break in the morning, anywhere between probably 30 to 45 minutes, and then it goes and incubates all day. This is probably just the bird getting up and rolling its eggs, sitting back down, just getting a little light penetration. And then you can see again, right before dusk, you see another nest break. So it leaves its nest, goes and does its thing, and then kind of comes back and spends the night incubating again. And then after the bird has incubated and hatched, you kind of see the background where the female tries to keep her young or her brood kind of covered in dense emergent cover for safety. So what we learned a lot of new aspects about wood duck migration that we haven't previously understood. We've identified kind of the timing of migration. We can learn about wood duck breeding ecology and migration with geolocators. We have aspects of wood duck breeding ecology that will allow us to better understand wood duck population ecology. So the talk was short and sweet. I'll leave it open for questions if you guys have any.
Okay, Andy, I'm going to read the ones I have in the chat. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. So Leslie asked, do pairs migrate together or separately, and do they winter in the same area?
Can you repeat that? Do broods win?
Do pairs, the male and female pairs, do they migrate together or do they migrate separately?
They usually migrate separately, right? So once the males breed with the females, they usually migrate. Their spring migration, they usually migrate from their southern wintering areas to their breeding areas together. But the males usually leave soon after the hens start incubating. So they do not migrate together going south.
Okay. Kind of same question. So Ken asks, please explain how to determine the lat and long position.
It's a good question. So latitude is determined by the timing between dawn and dusk, and the longitude is the timing between dusk and solar noon. It's a good question. There's a lot of math that goes into it, but I have those programs to run to get to extrapolate those lat longs. It's like within that built-in R program, it has the in-depth calculations to get from light level to lat long.
Okay. Another question, general question. Is this typical of female ducks of other species to be territorial versus the males?
Yes, it depends. It depends. Like geese, so geese, both pairs are very overprotective of their nests. So both the male and female geese would attack you. But there's some like hierarchy going on within these wood duck populations. So older males are kind of bullies to younger males. Yeah, so it's like typical kind of a hierarchical positioning in a population.
Okay, that was it. That was for we got two new questions here. Can a nest have eggs? Can you tell how far the hen takes the young from the nest?
We can't get, so with these geolocators, they're coarse scale migration. So we can't make any inference, or we can't make any determination of like less than 150 kilometers. So we can't look at fine scale movements with geolocators. You can with GPS units. So you can look at real time movements and see if hens are brooding or rearing young. compared to failed nesters. So that's a lot of the research coming out now, because we're looking at kind of these traits, or if we can pick up on the subjectivity, we can pick up on that, we can understand kind of more of where these birds are using these habitats to rear their young.
So basically the answer is not with that technology.
Not with this, yeah, not with geolocator technology. Correct. Sorry.
You had like a 12.5 mile. It has to move more than 12.5 miles to even register. Is that correct?
150 kilometers.
Okay. Oh God, yeah. So that's about 100 miles.
Yeah.
Another question: can a nest have eggs from more than one female?
Yes, that's called brood parasitism. So other females can have dumped their eggs in other individuals' nests, and a lot of the times that nest will become abandoned, or if you got a super hen, that hen will incubate all those eggs and hatch most of them.
Okay. Here's a good question. Do you know if your ducks are using nest boxes or natural tree cavities?
So we know a few known breeders. So a few known breeders we call out of nest boxes, but the majority of our sample size were caught using baited swimming traps. So with those we do not necessarily know if they use nest boxes or natural cavities.
So yeah, the part that I was involved in. Okay. Here's another question. Mark Martin again. How many females with geolocators were returned?
A good question, Mark. We in the 4 years we got, within the 3 years we got almost 80 back, and about four of them were males, so the rest were females.
Okay.
Sorry, another interesting fact too is a lot of these birds that we're getting back are being harvested in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. A few were harvested in Tennessee and Kentucky this year. So they're being harvested all over. We had one in Texas.
And the follow-up to that question: out of the large number of ducks banded, what percentage were recovered? All our wood ducks winter. Question is: do all of our wood ducks winter in Louisiana or Mississippi?
It depends, right? These 13 individuals, what we saw, whether they overwintered in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. But we also see evidence within males that they shortchange their migration and overwinter in Kentucky and southern Indiana and southern Illinois if the weather is good and there's open water within the Mississippi River and other small wooded forest wetlands.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of relay a little bit when I was helping Andy out with the project. So we were actually catching hens in nest boxes, and so we knew they were, laying eggs and incubating. There were a couple that we caught here at Horicon. One we caught on a nest that was already banded, and that band was literally within 150 yards of where she was banded. That's where she was nesting. Another one was just over the hill, literally I'm only about 200 yards away, and that bird was banded on a federal refuge. So really interesting things here. So another question, any info on migration for ducks breeding in North Carolina?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, you would have to ban and put geolocators out on birds in North Carolina to see where they're going.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I know one of the birds that we banded on my property that was harvested that fall, just literally a half mile down the creek. So that one didn't get a whole lot of data out of that one, you know, not a lot of movement, but it would be interesting. As yeah, another question was, where do they take those ducklings to brood? Where's the good brood habitat? Where are they rearing them? You know, to identify that part of their life stage.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we'd have to do some sort of like telemetry work. So Forbes have in Illinois, they've done that where they put a VHF bib on females to look at kind of habitat preference, or like brood and rearing habitat preference. But a lot of the times wood ducks like to take their broods into secluded areas, dense emergent vegetation, close to forested structures. They like to kind of raise their young in backwater sloughs where there's not many human like human presence kind of around. So yeah, areas like that within Wisconsin.
So you had relayed some anecdotal evidence you had of one of your first birds, first male wood ducks that you had banded up at Mead, and the little trip that he took over the summer vacation. Can you remember that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I know exactly the bird. His ID was E3. So yeah, so we banded him in mid-April. And then by late May, he left the Mead and flew to Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and spent the summer molting its flight feathers over there. So males usually don't usually stick around with the females and find good habitat to molt, so they lose their flight feathers anywhere between 15 to 30 days. So they need an area with good food resources and good cover. So we're starting to see kind of this westerly push of wood ducks within the Mississippi Flyway, kind of jumping over to North Dakota, Devil's Lake. But this bird ended up making a flight that we wouldn't necessarily have captured without geolocators on it. It flew back to the Mead and got harvested 300 yards from where it was banded. So yeah, it's really these small scale movements. I mean, even if the bird was banded and we caught it and the bird was harvested, and we see that the band was on the bird, without a geolocator, we'd expect that bird stayed there the whole time. But so we're starting to kind of understand maybe these small scale movements that wood ducks make, or male wood ducks make to molt migrate.
Interesting. Do you think that's more common than previously known, or is that kind of an outlier?
I think just getting into some of these male birds, it just seems like they're more. Yeah, we're starting to understand like maybe these birds are making smaller scale movements that we wouldn't have captured without some sort of kind of geolocation or GPS movement. yeah, so it's really cool to start to understand smaller scale movements and what these and how much these birds really move.
So the question is, so you're saying wood ducks might do a molt migration like Canada geese populations?
Yeah, or even like failed breeders, right? So geese, we've seen that like if females geese fail to breed, like they either forego breeding or they have a failed nest. These birds usually fly to different locations before they lose their flight feathers. So they're in areas where there's good resources um, for them to exploit.
So I got a question for you, Andy. Say a wood duck was on a nest and it failed early, and so she tries to re-nest.
We can see that.
Yeah, and so she's kind of bumping up against the clock as far as her molt. I mean, she's got a molt, right? And if she molts, she can't get back, you know, she loses her flight feathers to get back into the cavity, right? So it's kind of it has to be kind of a conscious decision by the duck. I mean, or understand, or is there some type of trigger that it's hormonal that all of a sudden, okay, I'm done incubating, you know, and then I can, you know, do my molt and rear my ducklings.
Yeah, it's I think it's you would like to say it might be a conscious decision, but I think it's more molecular or biological, like exactly what you said. There might be a trigger. Like it's very crazy to see birds or hens, especially very broody hens, that they want to breed, they want to have young, and so they'll like adopt other ducklings from other broods. So it's really cool to see. But yeah, you would have to do some maybe some sort of genetic work, like what you have, like cameras and recording like each individual event, each minute of the day. You could probably start to tease that stuff out.
I know during incubation, early incubation, or was it egg laying, Suzanne? My wife was, we have a video monitor on an S box next to our house. And so, you know, this was during COVID and my wife was working from home and you know, she could see the box out the window and all of a sudden, you know, she could see the TV or see the monitor where there was a hen already in there. And all of a sudden she saw another hen go in there and she's watching, and it's a knockdown, drag out fight. I mean, there's tussling and they're pecking at one another, and there's, you know, she can, you know, hear them, you know, not just on the audio monitor, she can hear, you know, live, you know, from the box, which is only, you know, maybe 25 feet from our house. And yeah, there was a pretty good tussle, and so she did, you know, the mom thing. She went out there and rapped on the box and told them to knock it off, and yeah, she kind of went quiet for a bit, and then, you know, she walked back in the house and they kind of went at it again, and she yelled out the window, and finally the other one, the interloper or one of them, took off. So pretty, you know, there's a lot of competition for these cavities, these nest boxes. So another question says, does color change with more dominant males or older males? And do the more colorful males are more attractive to females? Is the question.
That's a good question. So I'll answer the second one first. So do they become more colorful and more attractive to females? So females usually pick more dominant and brighter colored males, which kind of shows kind of like body structure. So the male is a tough, I don't know, a good breeder, so highly successful. And then the first question: does color change with more dominant males? Yes, you get more vibrant colors the older a bird gets. Once after 2 or 3 years old, they're gonna kind of have that dominant wood duck look, vibrant chestnut breast with these flashy greens and blues and these wonderful reds that just stick out. So yeah, kind of it works that kind of way.
You think, I know it's in other birds and their plumage as well. Does nutrition play a big factor in that?
Absolutely, yes, for sure. So with as you can see, maybe with more dominant and better body condition males, when they go from their summer plumage or their basic plumage to their breeding plumage, that sequence may take longer if that bird is in poor body condition than a bird that is in better body condition. So absolutely.
Ken just makes a comment there. He says he has 2 boxes with cameras, 2 hens at once is pretty common. And Mark says here, do you believe the significant number of wood ducks in Wisconsin are hatched in wood duck boxes?
That's a good question, Mark, and I would have to say I don't believe so. So in the early 1900s, wood ducks were on the brink of extinction, and that was because of like unregulated market hunting and massive deforestation. So I think in the Northwoods and kind of centrally, actually across much of Wisconsin, we see these older growth forests coming back, and so I think they're producing more natural cavities. So I think in general, birds that I think breed probably in more forested areas. You know what I mean? Not urbanized, like around big cities like Madison and like kind of Horicon area. You might see more use in nest boxes because there's less availability of natural cavities down there compared to central and kind of northern Wisconsin. So I believe that the majority of wood ducks that breed in Wisconsin are breeding in natural cavities.
I know there's always been a pretty good debate about that, whether they, are overall or do wood duck boxes, do they add to the overall populations?
Yeah, and a lot of people say that they think they add to local populations, but I think there's a very big study going on right now, kind of in the Atlantic flyaway states from southern Florida and Georgia to like North and South Carolina up to Maine, looking at recruitment of birds into the population from wood duck nest boxes by web tagging ducklings. And so with that, you can start to understand if a lot of these web tags are being reported or returned, or you're recapturing them. You see that we start to understand those numbers, but I'm not sure. Like I'd really like to see when they publish that study to look at recruitment from nest boxes into the overall continental population. It'll be interesting.
So I have a question for you. You know, you get down south, wood ducks are capable of having 2 broods a year. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it's one of the few individual waterfowl species in North America that have known to produce 2 broods in one breeding season.
So my question is, so they must molt right after the first first brood, correct? And they regain their flight feathers before the second one, so they can get back in the cavities. Is that correct?
Oh, they might just, if they failed once, they may try again before they molt. If it's early, if they think it's early enough.
But the ones that produce two broods a year, do they molt between the first and second hatches, or do they wait until the second one's all done?
Usually, that'd be a good study to start to do, but usually I think it molt happens after the second brood.
Okay.
Because they start so early, right? In January and February, they're breeding in January and February.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You can think about it like, you know, a normal duck, you could still lay eggs, but with a cavity nester, it's got to get back into the cavity. You know, so.
Exactly. And the cool thing, a lot of wood duck duckling studies seems to show that females will leave their young at 30 days of age. So when they're about a month old, that's probably when the hen bails out and renests.
So they don't stay with the brood until their full flight stage?
Correct.
Oh, okay. That's something I was unaware. I thought they would stay with them until their full flight stage. So that's about what, 60 to 70 days, depending upon their condition.
Yep, about 50 to 60 days. Yep.
Interesting. I know here at Horicon, when we do the wood duck banding, and that's generally done in early to mid-August, probably 80 to 90% of the birds that we get are adult males, because this is a molt marsh. So all the adult males come here to molt, and the few hens that we do get, those are the ones that are actually rearing young here. So there's not quite as many, but we get, I'd say, probably easily 80% adult males when we band here.
Yeah, I mean, banding in the spring up at Mead, it's crazy. The kind of the sex ratio you see up there. We were banding probably 4 to 5 males to every 1 female. So, and then some of the other stuff I did on my master's is kind of highlighted that we're starting to see kind of a more male biased in kind of the upper Mississippi wood duck population. So males are outnumbering females almost 2 to 1.
Another question here is, let me see here. Are there instances where another duck, say example, mergansers, lay eggs amongst wood duck eggs, or vice versa?
Yes, absolutely. So you see that quite frequently. Usually hooded mergansers get to breeding areas just a little before wood ducks. So a lot of the times hooded mergansers are already having nests and incubating before wood ducks get there. So wood ducks kind of prospecting or egg laying may definitely dump an egg in a merganser nest and vice versa. So yes, that happens quite frequently.
And they do go to hatch, and I have seen them probably at least 20 days old, 25, 30 days old, where you'll have you know, 6 wood ducks in a row and then 1 hooded merganser sitting on the same log, you know, at the same age. So it's, once that happens, you know, after that, I don't know. So we got a question here from Cindy says, West Central Illinois, I have boxes where a hen raises young, another hen raises its nest. Would the second hen be a younger one?
Would the second hen be? No, it could be. It could just be another breeding female that hadn't bred yet or haven't laid nests yet. So you could have these individual females that maybe forego breeding for a little bit before like this availability opens again. So maybe, or it could be the same female that lost its entire brood due to some unwelcoming circumstance, and it could be that same hen going back into the box and maybe starting to try to re-nest.
Yeah, I found that, you know, there seems to be like a second wave almost. You know, ducks come back here and, you know, they're ready to breed. And then, you know, the first week in April, we get, you know, start to get a bunch. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'll throw up another box or something, or move a box in, you know, late April, early May, when typically like you think it's too late to get anything like that. And bango, I'll have a bird in a box, you know, within days. So don't ever give up on them. You know, everybody says, you know, well, is it too late to put up a nest box? Well, you're not going to put up a nest box just for 1 year. It's, you know, it's a multiple year thing. And so you know, don't give up on that just because you missed that first opportunity or that window. You know, they can go till late May as far as initiating nests. I've had the last one that I had a lot of boxes in my yard. I got like 5 or 6 boxes in my yard. And probably 3 of those will have 2 broods out of the same box, you know, different hens, of course, but they seem to wait for that prime real estate or so and becomes available. So
hey, what's known about the relationship between wood ducks and screech owls as far as using nest?
okay, so the question here is from the audience, what's the relationship between wood ducks and screech owls using boxes?
I heard the end of the question. I heard screech owls and got a snicker out of it. Yeah, so screech owls are they breed at different times of the year, right? So usually screech owls are kind of overwintering in these nest boxes, and then they kind of move to a more northerly locations to breed, and then wood ducks come in. We in South Carolina, I think a couple of years ago, a eastern screech owl incubated and hatched a wood duck duckling. So I mean, it can absolutely happen. I think a lot of the times wood ducks are probably a little bit more aggressive than screech owls are, even though a screech owl is an owl. So these hens can kind of really beat up on these smaller screech owls. So usually the hens will kick them out.
Yeah. So what happens, I think here in Wisconsin, screech owls maybe tend to nest maybe just a little bit earlier. Maybe start to set up shop, and then, you know, for somebody that puts up nest boxes, if you find a screech owl in one, just put up another box. You know, I mean, it's you can have the best of both worlds. You know, it's pretty easy decision in my book. So I get another comment here from Mark. My guess is that if 10% of the wood ducks in Wisconsin use nest boxes, they produce more than 10% of the young. due to high nest predation in natural cavities. Predator guards, nest boxes make a big difference. Andy, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Mark. I mean, you're not wrong. Natural cavities, they're usually in deadfalls or broken branches off of trees. So you never know what can predate on incubating hens. You have American fisher. You have raccoons. You have ground predators, coyotes. You have bobcats. So absolutely. So what you're saying with the predator guards really would help on those nest boxes. And again, a lot of the studies that they've tried to do with natural cavity nesting wood ducks, they see that nest success is anywhere between 21 to 54%. So it's really low. So my guess is that yes, wood duck nest box programs probably do a good job at supplementing recruitment into the population.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? We got a question here from pardon? So the question is any particular direction that the nest box you should face?
I don't think it depends, right? I think there's been studies that have looked at like the secludedness of where you position a nest box further into like forest dwelling compared to kind of edge habitat right next to like wetland infrastructure. I've seen, I think you're gonna put nest boxes on poles than trees because they're gonna grow and kind of might mess up those nest boxes. So I've seen that anecdotally, kind of prospectively, I've seen that I think wood ducks prefer nest boxes that are on poles. They last longer. You can put up cavity guards. Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So my perspective on that from a nest box proponent is for wood ducks, no, it doesn't matter much. If you think about it, natural cavities are, face any direction. So, it's that, but the one thing that is very important is to have that clear flight path to and from that box, that wide open flight path, no willows, no branches, no vines around. So that hen wants to come and go as unobtrusively as possible. When she is, incubating, she doesn't want to draw a lot of attention to herself, because, like I said, and everything on the outside wants to eat what's on the inside of that box. So, she wants to be very secretive for that. So that's the only emphasis I say, as far as, as direction that it faces, no, long as it's a clear flight path.
And I'd also recommend that if you are going to start putting up nest boxes, you do have to clean them out every year. So maintenance, you have to do a yearly maintenance on them. So if you are planning on kind of putting up nest boxes, just be aware that you need to get in there every at the end of every summer, early fall, to get new wood chips in there to clean out all the old eggshells and stuff as well.
Yes, and to me, that's the fun part of it, the education part of it. You find out what happened. We're just putting them up like, okay, well, what happened? Well, I don't know. I just put them up, this way, you know what happens. You can go in there, you can count the membranes, you can go in there and like, oh, there was a a compound nest and nobody incubated, and then you find out, so that has, if that happens, that definitely has to get cleaned out. Otherwise, nobody's going to use that. You got, 25 rotten eggs in a box. Who's gonna, that definitely has to be cleaned out. And then this last couple of times we went out with some group from our education facility here. We ended up finding some screech owls in a box, and you're literally, luckily this last one, I thought, wow, I was just about ready to open up the box, and I had already undone the screw to take it open. I thought, oh, I better check first. And so I take the, just stick your cell phone in, take a picture in the hole, and there, sure enough, there was actually two of them side by side, sitting right next, right by the hole. And yeah, I was pretty happy that I didn't open up the box and kind of disturb them, because they were just had, kind of leaning up against the box right underneath the hole, eyes shut. I worked third shift for a lot of years, so I know, I can really relate to what's going on there. Like, just, leave them alone. And, to me, that's the fun part, it's yeah, wood ducks are great. I love that, but there's just goes to show you how vital those cavities are, not just nest boxes, but, natural cavities in general. I probably got close to 10, 15 species that I know of in the right side, right off my head, that I've, had in a nest box of some kind. And I've had, hooded merganser's nest early, a wood duck right after that, a tree swallow following that, and then maybe a wren nest after that, or as you're cleaning out, you find some owl pellets. So that's evidence of at least 4 different species that have used that nest box or that cavity. So
yeah, and nest box, that's another cool thing too, is nest boxes give other migratory birds protection as well.
So with that, any more questions either from the audience or online? Did I hear somebody that wanted to chime in with a question? If not, I want to thank Andy again for your great presentation. Oh, a question. So you've got still 400 of these geolocators out there to recover. So what happens, say this year or 2 years from now, somebody harvests a bird that has a geolocator? Can you still send that information in to the address, and how is that data going to be?
Yeah, so yeah, sorry for interrupting you, Jeff. Yeah, so each individual band has a phone number on it that is linked to my former advisor, Dr. Ben Sedinger. So if you either harvest a bird, and you can just call that number and leave a voicemail, and he should get back to you to set up a way for us to get the geolocator back and get the data. Usually we have prepaid packaging that will get to you with an extra geolocator, duplicate for individuals to keep, and they can send the one that was on the bird back to us to get that data.
All righty.
And we're each bird is banded with a metal federal band. So we get harvest reports. So I've had to do some sleuthing where individuals have harvested a bird, reported the metal band, and I had to email them to get in contact with them for they try to get those bands back.
Yeah, the typical silver band that you get from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that will give you a banding date, but that's one of the cons of the geolocators. They must be returned to get that data out of them and processed. But you get a lot more data from them. So, and there's also, there's a special code. So if you may see a bird checking out a nest box and it has one of these blue bands on it, you can certainly, get some photographs of that and send that in as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Like anything, right? Like a lot of like birders like to read bands on birds. So yeah, like those individuals are marked within the federal system, so you can report what you have seen, those alphanumeric symbols. You can report it to eBird or the bird banding lab within the auxiliary mark, and you can report those birds alive, and so you can start to get survival as well.
Yes, so they can get, multiple, I'll get a photo here, send them in, somebody else, gets it somewhere else. So you can get, multiple reports of those. So with that, Andy, you got any final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I always love talking about wood ducks, and I'm glad you all could join. I'm glad you all had some very great questions, and yeah, I look forward to, if you guys have any more questions or anything, my contact information was up there. If you need it, you can get it from Jeff as well. And so with that, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks everybody for attending tonight. And we will see you in April then. All right.
Have a good one, Jeff.
Yep, you too.